The morning of March 3, 2025, draped Arlington National Cemetery in a gray mist, like a mourner's veil softening the edges of endless gravestones. The air was heavy, taut with a stillness that made every sound a soldier's boot crunching dry grass. A flag snapping in the early breeze sliced through the quiet like a blade. Rows of black chairs stood under an ancient oak, holding the family of Ethan Mitchell, a 22-year-old sergeant killed in a midnight ambush on the Syrian border. His mother, Clara Mitchell, 58, sat ramrod straight, her hands clutching a folded flag, her eyes locked on the flag-draped casket at the center of the ceremonial zone. No one spoke. No one coughed. This was a military funeral, where grief knelt before honor, and every gesture carried the weight of sacrifice. Clara's fingers traced the flag's stitches, her lips trembling but silent. Beside her, Ethan's younger cousin, a boy of 10 in a miniature dress uniform, stared at the casket, his small medals glinting under the overcast sky. The honor guard stood rigid, their rifles gleaming, their faces carved from stone. A distant bugle's note hung in the air, unanswered. The crowd, veterans, soldiers, Pentagon officials, sat upright, their gazes fixed forward, as if looking away might dishonor the fallen. The oak's branches swayed, casting shadows that danced across the casket, a reminder that even in death, Ethan was part of something larger. A low rumble pierced the silence, shattering the sacred hush. A black SUV eased through a side gate, its engine a faint hum, barely noticeable. But chaos doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. A military supply truck, its driver distracted by a buzzing phone, swerved too close, its tires screaming as it veered toward the SUV. Metal scraped, a sickening groan echoed, and the SUV lurched to avoid a collision, halting inches from disaster. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Soldiers flinched, their hands twitching toward holsters. A young honor guard, no older than 19, dropped his flagpole, the wood cracking against the ground with a sound that felt like a violation. The boy in the miniature uniform whispered, his voice small but sharp. "Mom, what was that?" Clara's knuckles whitened on her flag, her eyes darting to the SUV, but she didn't answer, her breath caught in her throat. The crowd stirred, a low murmur of unease spreading like wildfire. A Pentagon official in the third row leaned forward, his brow furrowed, muttering, "That's not supposed to happen." The air thickened, the mist seeming to coil tighter around the scene, as if the cemetery itself was holding its breath. The SUV's door opened and out stepped Lillian Harper, 52, a 4-star general, her uniform crisp, the stars on her shoulder gleaming like beacons against the dull sky. Her polished black shoes hit the ground, and 2 nearby guards saluted instinctively, their arms snapping up as if pulled by strings. Lillian carried a small urn wrapped in black cloth, a final tribute to Ethan, a soldier she'd once commanded in the scorching chaos of Kandahar. Her face was stone, her walk steady, but her presence shifted the air, a quiet force that demanded attention. People stood not out of fear, but awe. A veteran in the back row nudged his neighbor, whispering, "That's General Harper." Another nodded, his eyes tracing her stars, earned through decades of battlegrounds most could only imagine. She was no stranger here, her name whispered in Pentagon halls, her record etched in blood and valor. But to some, her skin dark, unapologetic made her an outsider, a truth she'd faced too many times to flinch from now. Her gaze swept the crowd, calm but piercing, and for a moment, the cemetery seemed to pause, as if honoring her arrival. Travis Coleman, 42, head of the cemetery's West Perimeter security, didn't stand. His boots stormed forward, his palm slamming the SUV's hood with a crack that stung the air like a gunshot. The crowd froze, the sound jarring against the solemnity, a blasphemy in this sacred space. The boy's whisper cut through again, louder now. "Mom, why's he mad?" Clara's fingers tightened, her mourning cloth crumpling under her grip, but she stayed silent, her eyes narrowing. Coleman's gray eyes raked over Lillian's uniform, his sneer a blade of contempt, sharp and deliberate. "Thought you were with the choir," he spat, his voice loud enough to sting the front row, each word dripping with venom. The implication was clear. A black woman in stars didn't belong here, not in his eyes, not in this hallowed ground. Lillian didn't blink. She opened a leather wallet, pulled out her military ID, and held it up with surgical precision, her gaze locked on Coleman's, unyielding, unflinching. The ID gleamed, its embossed seal catching the faint light, a testament to her rank, her service, her right to be here. Coleman barely glanced at it, his lips curling into a smirk. "Fakes look real good now," he said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Especially for folks trying to prove something." Murmurs stirred through the crowd, anger, shock, shame, a low rumble that threatened to erupt. A veteran in the back row clenched his fists, his metals clinking softly, his face red with barely contained rage. Another, a former sergeant with a prosthetic leg, leaned forward, muttering, "Who does he think he is?" Lillian tucked the ID away, her movements deliberate, her eyes boring into Coleman's, a silent challenge that needed no words. She took a step toward the casket, her shoes clicking on the stone path, her intent clear. She was here to honor Ethan, and no man's prejudice would stop her. Coleman's arm shot up, blocking her path, his body a wall of defiance. "Restricted zone," he growled, his voice low but venomous. "No list, no entry." The words landed like a slap, their authority hollow but sharp. An older veteran, a former captain with gray hair and a chest full of ribbons, muttered under his breath, "Are we burying Ethan or dignity itself?" The question hung in the air, unanswered as the mist thickened, cloaking the scene in a ghostly haze, the tension so palpable it seemed the earth might crack. Lillian stood, her black shoes inches from Coleman's boots, her silence a fortress no taunt could breach. Her left hand gripped the urn steady, not a speck of ash shaken loose, a symbol of her bond with Ethan, her duty to him unbroken even in death. Her right hand rested at her side, fingers still but ready, a soldier's instinct never far from the surface. Coleman leaned closer, his breath hot, his voice dropping to a hiss that carried the weight of years of resentment. "I got the right to check," he said, his eyes flicking to her stars, dismissing them as if they were cheap trinkets. "Those stars don't skip the line." His hand hovered near his Glock, fingers twitching, daring her to move, to give him an excuse. The casket's flag fluttered, as if pleading for peace in a moment spiraling toward violence. A young woman in the crowd, a journalism student with a backpack and a shaky grip, raised her phone, her hands trembling as she hit record. The weak 4G signal blurred the image, but the live stream began, a spark that would soon ignite a firestorm across the nation. Comments flooded in. "Is this real? That's a general. Call the MPs." The crowd held its breath, the air so still it seemed the world had paused. A soldier in the honor guard shifted, his rifle glinting, his eyes darting between Lillian and Coleman, torn between duty and disbelief. Clara's sister, the boy's mother, pulled him closer, shielding his view, her face pale but her jaw set. Lillian's gaze didn't waver, her silence louder than any command, a rebuke that cut deeper than words. She stepped forward again, her shoe brushing Coleman's boot, a deliberate act of defiance. His hand snapped to his Glock, the metallic scrape tearing through the sacred quiet like nails dragged across glass. The crowd gasped, a collective inhale that sucked the air dry, the sound echoing in the mist. "One more step," Coleman hissed, his voice tight with rage, "and I'll take it as a threat." The gun was out now, its barrel aimed at Lillian's chest, a violation so raw it seemed to crack the earth beneath them. The boy's mother stifled a sob, her hand over her mouth, while Clara's eyes burned, her body trembling but rooted to her chair. A voice shattered the standoff, raw and desperate. "Lower that gun." It was a young soldier, barely 18, his face flushed, his dress uniform too big for his lanky frame. He stepped forward, his voice cracking but fierce, his hands balled into fists. "She's a general, you idiot." The crowd froze, stunned by his audacity, the air electric with shock. His squad leader, a grizzled sergeant with a scar across his cheek, grabbed his arm, yanking him back with a harsh whisper, "Stand down, kid, now." But the damage was done. Coleman's eyes flicked to the boy, his gun wavering, then swung back to Lillian, his face a mask of fury. "You training kids to mouth off now," he snarled, his voice thick with rage, the gun now splitting its threat between Lillian and the boy. The journalism student's phone caught every second, her hands shaking but steady enough to keep filming, the live stream's view count ticking upward, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. A comment flashed, "This is insane. Arrest that cop." Another, "Protect General Harper." Lillian didn't move, her eyes locked on Coleman's, her silence a blade honed by years of facing worse than a Glock in a cemetery. The urn in her hand gleamed, a silent testament to Ethan's trust in her, a bond forged in the chaos of war. Clara Mitchell stood now, her flag falling to her lap, her voice low but piercing through the tension. "Let her pass," she said, each word a plea wrapped in steel, a mother's demand for her son's honor. Coleman's jaw tightened, his gun steady, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt, a crack in his armor. The crowd stirred, a low rumble of discontent swelling, no longer content to watch in silence. A veteran in a wheelchair, his medals clinking, rolled forward, his voice gravelly but firm. "You're pointing a gun at honor, son. Think twice." The words landed like a punch, heavy with the weight of decades of service, but Coleman didn't lower his weapon, his pride a cage he couldn't escape, his resentment a fire burning too hot to quench. Then the unthinkable happened, a moment that would sear itself into the nation's memory. A group of older veterans, their faces weathered, their uniforms adorned with ribbons and scars from wars long past, rose as one. They didn't speak, didn't shout, but moved with the precision of men who'd faced death and walked away. They formed a loose semicircle between Lillian and Coleman, their eyes hard, their hands clasped behind their backs, a human wall of defiance. The tallest, a former Green Beret with a silver star pinned to his chest, stared Coleman down, his silence louder than any order, his presence a challenge that needed no words. The crowd's murmurs grew, a tide of anger rising, no longer restrained by protocol. The journalism student's phone shook, but she kept filming, the live stream now at 50,000 viewers, the hashtag #VeteranStand climbing Twitter's trending list. Comments poured in. "These vets are legends. Shame on that cop. General Harper deserves respect." Coleman's gun wavered, his knuckles white, his face a storm of rage and uncertainty. "Back off," he barked, but his voice cracked, betraying the fear he'd never admit, a man caught in a trap of his own making. Lillian stood behind the veterans, her gaze still fixed on Coleman, her presence a mountain unmoved by his storm. The boy in the miniature uniform broke free from his mother, running to Clara's side, his small voice clear in the chaos. "Why's he pointing a gun at her?" The question hung, unanswered, slicing through the tension like a blade. Clara pulled him close, her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed, her voice a whisper only he could hear. "Because some men fear what they can't control." The flag on the casket fluttered again, a silent witness to the desecration unfolding, its stars and stripes a mute plea for the honor it represented. The air thickened, every dust particle heavy with consequence, the mist seeming to tighten its grip on the scene. A soft buzz cut through the standoff, a drone, hovering midair, its lens zooming in on Coleman's face, capturing every bead of sweat, every twitch of his jaw. No one knew who sent it, but its presence was a verdict, etching Coleman's actions into a digital dossier that would outlive this moment. The journalism student's live stream hit 100,000 viewers, the video spreading like wildfire to Reddit, TikTok, and military forums. A post on X blazed with a red caption. "Cop pulls gun on black general at funeral. This is our country." The comments were a warzone outrage, disbelief, calls for justice, and a few scattered voices defending Coleman's protocol. A tweet gained traction. "General Harper led my brother's unit in Afghanistan. This is a disgrace." Another. "Arrest that cop now." The world was watching, and the cemetery was no longer just a place of mourning, it was a stage, and Coleman was unraveling under the spotlight. Lillian adjusted her grip on the urn, her fingers steady, her face a mask of resolve forged in battles far bloodier than this. She spoke, her voice low, clear, cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk. "You're not doubting my ID," she said, each word honed to a razor's edge. "You're doubting my right to carry it." The crowd stilled, her words a mirror forcing Coleman to face himself, his prejudice laid bare. His lips tightened, his gun still raised, but his eyes flickered, a man caught between defiance and the dawning realization that he was losing control. The veterans didn't budge, their wall unyielding, their silence a judgment heavier than any shout. Clara's voice rose again, trembling but firm, a mother's heartbreaking but unbroken. She was Ethan's commander. Let her honor him. The boy clutched her hand, his eyes wide, sensing the weight of a moment he couldn't fully grasp, his small frame trembling but rooted beside her. Coleman's gun shook now, his control slipping, his face a mask of rage battling fear. "I said stop," he roared, his voice cracking the air, so loud it seemed to shake the oak above. The portrait at the head of the casket, a framed photo of Ethan smiling in his uniform, tilted and fell, the glass shattering on the stone path with a sound that felt like a second death. The crowd gasped, a collective cry of horror. Clara stood, her flag slipping to the ground, her hands trembling as she stared at the broken frame, her son's face now lying in shards at Lillian's feet. The journalism student's phone caught it all. the live stream surging to 150,000 viewers, the comments a torrent of fury. He broke the portrait. This is sacrilege. General Harper, don't back down. The drone's buzz grew louder, its lens unblinking, a silent judge in the sky. Lillian didn't move, her eyes locked on Coleman's, her silence a rebuke that cut deeper than any shout. The urn in her hand was steady, a symbol of her duty to Ethan, a promise she would not break. She didn't look at the shattered portrait, not out of disrespect, but because bowing her head now would be a surrender she refused to give. The veterans tightened their semicircle, their faces grim, their eyes daring Coleman to act. The young soldier who'd shouted earlier strained against his squad leader's grip, his voice hoarse but defiant. "You're a disgrace," he yelled, his words echoing in the mist. Coleman's gun swung toward him, then back to Lillian, his face a storm of indecision, his authority crumbling under the weight of 100 accusing eyes. Clara stepped forward, her mourning cloth forgotten, her voice rising above the chaos. "You're not protecting honor," she said, her words sharp, a mother's pain forged into steel. "You're spitting on my son's grave." The crowd surged with her, a low roar of agreement, no longer content to sit in silence. A woman in the third row, a Pentagon staffer, stood, her phone raised, recording her own video, her voice trembling but clear. "This is General Lillian Harper. She saved lives. Who are you?" The question landed like a grenade, and Coleman flinched, his gun dipping slightly, his eyes darting to the crowd, searching for an ally and finding none. The live stream hit 200,000 viewers, the hashtag VeteranStan now trending globally, with posts flooding X. "General Harper is a hero. Fire that cop. This is America's shame." The drone's lens zoomed closer, capturing Coleman's sweat-slicked face, his trembling hand, his eyes wild with the realization that he was no longer in control. The journalism student's hand shook, but she kept filming, her live stream a beacon for a nation waking up to the outrage. A comment flashed. "This is bigger than Arlington. This is about who we are." Another, "General Harper, we're with you." Lillian stood, her black shoes rooted to the stone, her stars gleaming in the faint light, a living testament to everything Coleman could never understand. She spoke again, her voice calm but unyielding, each word a verdict. "If I die here," she said, "the country will know why." The crowd stilled, her words a sworn testimony, a permanent record that needed no amplification. Coleman's eyes broke, his gun wavering, his breath ragged, a man staring into the abyss of his own making. The veterans stepped closer, their wall tightening, their silence a force that pressed against Coleman's resolve. The young soldier broke free from his squad leader, his face red, his voice raw. "You're done," he shouted, pointing at Coleman, his defiance a spark that threatened to ignite the crowd. Clara clutched her nephew, her eyes locked on Lillian, a silent nod passing between them, a pact forged in shared grief and resolve. The boy's voice rose again, small but piercing. "She's here for Ethan. Why won't you let her?" The question was a dagger cutting through the chaos, and Coleman flinched, his gun dipping further, his authority unraveling thread by thread. The live stream surged to 250,000 viewers, the comments a flood of rage and support. "General Harper is untouchable. Arrest him now. This is our history being written." A new sound cut through a sharp click, the unmistakable sound of a weapon being unlatched. Two military security officers, dressed in dark ballistic vests, emerged from the perimeter, their hands on their firearms, their faces grim. They moved with purpose, no hesitation, their boots echoing on the stone path. The crowd parted, a silent acknowledgement of their authority. Coleman turned, sensing their approach, his gun still raised but his eyes wide with panic. "Drop your weapon," one officer said, his voice neither loud nor soft, but carrying the finality of a military command. Coleman scoffed, his chin tilting up, his voice sliding across the graves. "This is political theater," he spat. "You think this is a movie?" But no one responded. The crowd's silence was no longer shock, it was judgment, cold and unyielding. The officers didn't hesitate. One stepped forward, disarming Coleman with practiced ease, the Glock clattering to the ground. The other cuffed him, the metal snapping shut with a sound that echoed like a gavel. Coleman froze, his face a mask of disbelief, as if only now realizing the line he'd crossed. He raised his head, locking eyes with Lillian, and spat through gritted teeth. "I know who you are. I know exactly." Lillian didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her silence was her victory, her stars her shield, her urn her truth. The officers escorted Coleman away, his boots dragging through the heaviest silence the cemetery had ever held. No boos, no applause, no pity. The crowd remained still, not in shock but in shame, each person asking themselves, why didn't we stop this sooner? Lillian stood where she was, the urn still in her hand, her gaze never following Coleman. She looked at the casket, at the shattered portrait of Ethan, his smile intact despite the broken glass. Clara knelt, her fingers brushing the shards, her tears falling silently. The boy clung to her, his eyes on Lillian, a question unspoken but burning. The veterans dispersed, their wall dissolving, but their presence lingered, a testament to the line they'd drawn. The journalism student lowered her phone, her live stream now at 300,000 viewers. The video shared across every platform, the hashtag Veterans Stand a rallying cry. A post on X summed it up. General Harper didn't just stand. She forced us to see. The drone vanished into the mist, its footage already spreading, a silent witness to a moment that would change everything. Lillian stepped toward the casket, her shoes touching the cracked earth, each step a reclamation of honor. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate, her presence a quiet rebuke to the chaos that had unfolded. The crowd watched, their silence now a tribute, not a failing. Clara rose, holding the broken portrait, her eyes meeting Lillian's, a nod passing between them, a shared vow to honor Ethan, no matter the cost. The boy's voice broke the quiet, soft but clear. Is she gonna be okay? Clara pulled him close, her voice a whisper. She's stronger than all of us. The flag on the casket fluttered one last time, as if saluting Lillian, as if Ethan himself was watching. The live stream's final comment flashed. This isn't the end. This is the beginning. The mist over Arlington National Cemetery thickened as Travis Coleman's wrist snapped into cuffs, the metallic click echoing like a gavel in the heavy silence of March 3, 2025. His Glock lay on the stone path, a discarded relic of his unraveling authority, glinting dully beside the shattered portrait of Ethan Mitchell, the 22-year-old sergeant whose funeral had been desecrated. Lillian Harper, 52, stood unmoved, her four-star general's uniform crisp, her stars gleaming under the gray sky, the black-wrapped urn in her hand a steady anchor. Her gaze never followed Coleman as two military security officers escorted him away, his boots dragging through the dirt, his defiance reduced to a hiss. I know who you are. The crowd, veterans, soldiers, Ethan's family stood frozen, their silence not shock but a collective shame, each face asking why they hadn't acted sooner. Clara Mitchell, 58, Ethan's mother, knelt by the broken portrait, her fingers trembling as she brushed glass from her son's smile, tears falling silently. The boy in the miniature uniform, her nephew, clung to her side, his small voice barely audible. Is it over? Clara pulled him close, her eyes on Lillian, whispering, not yet. The air was electric, every breath charged with the weight of what had just happened. The journalism student, her hands still shaking, kept her phone raised, the live stream surging past 300,000 viewers, the hashtag Veterans Stand a wildfire across X, TikTok, and Reddit. Comments flooded in, General Harper is a legend. That cop's done. This is America's disgrace. A drone buzzed overhead, its lens a silent judge, capturing Coleman's cuffed retreat, his sweat-slicked face, his eyes wild with a mix of rage and fear. The crowd stirred, their silence breaking into murmurs, a low rumble of anger and disbelief. The veterans who'd formed a semicircle to shield Lillian dispersed slowly, their faces grim, their medals clinking as they returned to their seats, but their presence lingered, a wall of honor that had shifted the tide. Lillian stepped closer to the casket, her polished shoes touching the cracked earth, each movement deliberate, a reclamation of the sacred space Coleman had violated. The flag on the casket fluttered, as if saluting her resolve, as if Ethan himself was watching. But Coleman wasn't finished. Even in cuffs his defiance burned, a fire fed by years of resentment. He twisted against the officer's grip, his voice rising, sharp and venomous. This ain't over, he shouted, his words slicing through the mist, drawing every eye back to him. You think you can parade in here with your stars and rewrite the rules? I'm the law here. The officers tightened their hold, but Coleman jerked forward, his face red, his eyes locked on Lillian. You don't belong here, and you know it. The crowd gasped, the slur unspoken but hanging in the air, a poison that stung deeper than any bullet. Clara stood, her mourning cloth forgotten, her voice cutting through the chaos. You've shamed my son's grave enough, she said, each word a blade, a mother's pain forged into steel. The boy's eyes widened, his small hand clutching her sleeve, his voice trembling. Why's he still yelling? Lillian didn't flinch, her gaze steady, her silence a fortress no taunt could breach. She adjusted the urn in her hand, her fingers steady, Her face a mask of resolve forged in battlegrounds far bloodier than this. The officers pulled Coleman back, but he resisted, his boots scraping the stone, his voice growing louder, more desperate. "You're all blind," he roared, his eyes sweeping the crowd, searching for an ally and finding none. "She's playing you and you're eating it up." The journalism student's phone shook, but she kept filming, the live stream now at 400,000 viewers, the comments a torrent of fury. "Shut him up. General Harper's a hero. Arrest him for good." A post on X went viral. "This cop's racism is live for the world to see. Veterans stand." The drone's buzz intensified, its lens zooming in, capturing every twitch of Coleman's face, every bead of sweat, a digital dossier that would haunt him forever. The young soldier who'd shouted earlier, 18 and lanky in his oversized uniform, broke free from his squad leader's grip, his face flushed with righteous anger. "You're a disgrace," he yelled, stepping toward Coleman, his fists clenched, his voice raw. "You don't get to talk to her like that." The crowd surged with him, a wave of murmurs swelling into shouts, no longer content to sit in silence. His squad leader lunged, grabbing his arm, his voice harsh. "Stand down, Private, or you're done." But the boy's defiance was a spark, igniting the crowd. A woman in the third row, a Pentagon staffer with a crisp blazer, stood, her phone raised, her voice trembling but clear. "This is General Lillian Harper, who saved lives in Kandahar. Who are you?" The question landed like a grenade, and Coleman flinched, his cuffed hands jerking, his eyes darting to the crowd, finding only accusation. Then the veterans acted again, their resolve a force of nature. The group of older men, their faces weathered, their uniforms heavy with ribbons, rose once more, moving with the precision of a unit under fire. They reformed their semicircle, not just between Lillian and Coleman but around the casket, a human fortress protecting Ethan's honor. The tallest, a former Green Beret with a silver star, stepped forward, his eyes locked on Coleman, his silence louder than any command. "You're done here," he said, his voice low, gravelly, carrying the weight of decades of service. The other veterans closed ranks, their hands clasped behind their backs, their faces grim, a wall no gun could breach. The crowd roared, a tide of anger and pride, their voices blending into a chant. "Honor! Honor!" The journalism students' live stream hit 500,000 viewers, the hashtag veterans stand trending globally, with posts flooding X. "These vets are everything. General Harper's untouchable. Shame on that cop." Coleman's face twisted, his defiance crumbling under the weight of the veteran's wall. "You can't do this," he shouted, his voice cracking, his body straining against the cuffs. "I'm protecting this place." But his words fell flat, drowned by the crowd's chant. Their voices a judgment he couldn't escape. The officers tightened their grip, pulling him toward the perimeter gate. But Coleman twisted, his eyes finding Lillian, his voice a hiss of desperation. "You think you've won? This country ain't yours." The slur was there again, unspoken but palpable, a poison that stung the air. Lillian stood, her black shoes rooted to the earth, her stars gleaming, her silence a rebuke sharper than any shout. She didn't need to reply, her presence was her answer. A mountain unmoved by his storm. Clara stepped forward, her eyes burning, her voice rising above the chaos. "You don't get to decide who honors my son," she said, her words trembling with grief and fury. She was his commander, his shield. "You're nothing but a coward with a badge." The crowd erupted, their chant growing louder. "Honor! Honor!" The boy broke free, running to the casket, his small hands touching the flag, his voice clear. "This is for Ethan." The act was simple, childish, but it struck like lightning, a reminder of why they were here, of what Coleman had defiled. The journalism student's phone caught it all, the live stream surging to 600,000 viewers, the comments a flood of emotion. "That kid's braver than the cop. General Harper, we see you. This is our history." The young soldier, undeterred by his squad leader's warnings, moved closer, his face red, his voice hoarse. "You're not one of us," he shouted at Coleman, pointing, his defiance a beacon for the crowd. A second soldier, a woman in her 20s with a buzz cut, broke ranks, joining him, her voice sharp. "You disgraced the uniform." The squad leader yelled, "Back in line!" But the rebellion spread. A third soldier stepping forward, then a fourth, their faces a mix of anger and shame. The crowd fed off their courage, their chant morphing. "Stand with Harper! Stand with Harper!" The drone's lens swept the scene, capturing the soldiers, the veterans, the boy, and Lillian. A tableau of resistance etched into the digital age. A tweet went viral. The military's turning on him. This is bigger than Arlington. Veterans stand. Coleman's knees buckled, his defiance draining as the officers dragged him toward the gate. You're all fools, he screamed, his voice raw, a man shouting into a void. She's using you and you're too weak to see it. But his words were swallowed by the crowd's roar, their voices a tide that drowned his hate. The veterans tightened their wall, their eyes never leaving Coleman, their silence a verdict heavier than any court. Lillian adjusted the urn, her fingers steady, her gaze fixed on the casket, not Coleman, as if he were already a memory fading into the mist. Clara knelt again, her hands gathering the portrait's shards, her tears falling but her resolve unbroken. The boy stood beside her, his small frame trembling, his eyes on Lillian, a question burning in his gaze. Why didn't she fight back? The live stream hit 700,000 viewers, the video spreading to every corner of the internet, from military forums to newsrooms. A Reddit thread exploded. Cop pulls gun on black general at Arlington. This is our shame. Comments poured in. General Harper's silence is louder than his gun. Those vets are heroes. Fire that cop now. A TikTok video stitched the live stream with a veteran's voiceover. This is what happens when hate wears a badge. Stand with Harper. The hashtag #VeteranStand climbed higher, joined by Honor for Ethan. A call to remember the soldier whose funeral had been hijacked. News alerts pinged on phones across the crowd, headlines flashing. Officer draws gun on general at Arlington funeral. The drone circled, its footage streaming to an unknown server. A silent witness to a moment that would redefine a nation. Lillian took another step toward the casket, her shoes clicking on the stone, each movement a defiance of Coleman's hate. The veterans parted slightly, their wall opening to let her pass, a gesture of respect that needed no words. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate, her presence a quiet rebuke to the chaos that had unfolded. The crowd's chant softened, their voices a murmur of awe. Harper, Harper, a name becoming a symbol. Clara rose, holding the broken portrait, her eyes meeting Lillian's, a nod passing between them, a shared vow to honor Ethan, no matter the cost. The boy's voice broke the quiet, soft but clear. Is she gonna be okay? Clara pulled him close, her voice a whisper. She's stronger than all of us. But the tension wasn't over. As the officers neared the gate, Coleman twisted free, his cuffed hands swinging, his voice a roar of desperation. You'll regret this, he shouted, his eyes wild, his face a mask of fury. I'm not the villain here. The officers tackled him, pinning him to the ground, his shouts muffled but unrelenting. She's the threat, not me. The crowd surged forward, their voices rising again. Honor! Honor! A veteran in a wheelchair rolled to the front, his metals clinking, his voice booming. You're the threat, son. You and your hate. The words struck like a hammer, and Coleman's shouts faltered, his body slumping under the officer's grip. The journalism student's live stream hit 800,000 viewers, the comments a storm. He's still fighting? General Harper's won. This is justice. The young soldier, now surrounded by his peers, broke ranks again, running toward the casket, his face red with defiance. This is for Ethan, he shouted, his voice cracking, his hands touching the flag, a gesture that mirrored the boy's earlier act. The crowd roared, their chant shifting. For Ethan! For Ethan! The female soldier joined him, her buzz cut gleaming, her voice sharp. We stand with Harper. More soldiers followed, a dozen now, their faces a mix of pride and shame, their defiance a rebellion against the silence that had let Coleman's hate fester. The squad leader stood back, his face grim, knowing he couldn't stop them, knowing this was bigger than his orders. The drone captured it all, its lens sweeping the scene, a moment of history unfolding in real time. Lillian reached the casket, her hand brushing the flag, her fingers steady, her stars gleaming. She didn't speak, didn't need to. Her presence was her speech, her silence her verdict. The veterans flanked her, their wall now a guard of honor, their eyes on the casket, not Coleman, as if he were already gone. Clara approached, holding the portrait's shards, her voice low but firm. He wanted you here, she said, her eyes wet but unyielding. He said your voice kept him alive. Lillian nodded, a faint softening in her gaze, a soldier acknowledging a mother's pain. The boy stood between them, his small hand touching the casket, his voice a whisper. Thank you, General. The crowd's chant faded, their voices a hush, a tribute to a moment they'd never forget. The officers dragged Coleman through the gate, his shouts fading into the mist, his defiance reduced to echoes. The crowd watched, their silence now a choice, not a failing. The journalism student lowered her phone, her live stream at 900,000 viewers. The video shared millions of times, a spark that would ignite a reckoning. A post on X summed it up. General Harper didn't fight. She stood. And that's why we're all standing now. The drone vanished, its footage spreading, a silent witness to a moment that would change everything. Lillian placed the urn beside the casket, her hand lingering on the flag, her silence a promise to Ethan, to Clara, to a nation watching. The crowd held its breath, knowing this wasn't the end, but the beginning of something unstoppable. As the gate of Arlington National Cemetery clanged shut behind Travis Coleman on March 3, 2025, the mist seemed to swallow his fading shouts, leaving only the echo of his defiance in the heavy air. Lillian Harper, 52, stood by Ethan Mitchell's casket, her four-star general's uniform a beacon in the gray light, the black-wrapped urn now resting beside the flag-draped coffin, a silent tribute to the 22-year-old sergeant whose funeral had been shattered. Her polished shoes pressed into the cracked earth, her gaze steady, her silence a vow to Ethan that no man's hate could erase. Clara Mitchell, 58, Ethan's mother, clutched the broken portrait of her son, its glass shards glinting in her hands, her tears falling but her resolve unbroken. Her nephew, the boy in the miniature uniform, stood beside her, his small hand touching the casket, his voice a whisper. She did it for Ethan. The crowd, veterans, soldiers, mourners watched in hushed awe, their chant of Harper, Harper, fading into a reverent silence. A collective breath held for a moment that felt like history turning a page. The journalism students' live stream, now at 900,000 viewers, pulsed with comments. General Harper's a hero. That cop's done. This is our shame. The hashtag veteran stand burned across X, TikTok, and Reddit, a digital wildfire that refused to die. But the silence at Arlington was only the calm before a storm. As the crowd dispersed, their phones buzzing with news alerts, the video of Coleman's gun pointed at Lillian's chest spread like a plague, infecting every corner of the internet. By noon, the live stream had hit 2 million views, shared by influencers, veterans, and outraged citizens. A Reddit thread titled "Cop vs. General at Arlington, America's Disgrace" exploded with 50,000 upvotes, comments raging. This is why we can't trust the system. General Harper's silence broke him. Fire that racist now. TikTok videos stitched the footage with voiceovers, one veteran's clip going viral. I served 20 years. Never seen a general disrespected like this. Stand with Harper. The hashtag honor for Ethan joined veterans stand. A dual cry for Lillian's dignity and Ethan's memory. Newsrooms scrambled, headlines flashing across screens. Officer pulls gun on black general at military funeral. CNN ran a breaking news segment, a retired colonel's voice shaking. This isn't just an incident. It's a betrayal of everything we fight for. In a small newsroom in Alexandria, Virginia, a young reporter named Sarah Nguyen, 27, watched the live stream on her laptop, her coffee growing cold. She'd been at Arlington, not as a journalist but as a mourner, her brother a Marine who'd served with Ethan. Her hands trembled as she typed, her ex-post simple but searing. I saw General Harper stand tall while a cop pointed a gun at her. If she's not safe at Arlington, who is? Veterans stand. The post gained 10,000 retweets in an hour, her inbox flooding with messages from veterans, activists, and strangers. Sarah's editor, a grizzled man who'd covered wars, called her in. This is your story, he said, his voice gruff. Dig into that cop. Find out who he is. Sarah nodded, her heart racing, knowing this wasn't just a scoop, it was a reckoning. She started with Coleman's name, a detail caught in the live stream's audio, and within hours, she was scouring public records, police reports, and anonymous tips pouring in from ex-users. By evening, the first cracks in Coleman's armor appeared. A leaked personnel file from the Virginia State Police, posted anonymously on a military forum, revealed a 2012 complaint Coleman had filed after being rejected from military enlistment. The document, handwritten in slanted ink, seethed with resentment. This unit favors black soldiers. If someone like me isn't allowed to serve, they don't deserve to be called soldiers. The forum thread exploded, users dissecting every word. This guy's been bitter for years. He targeted Harper because of who she is. Sarah cross-referenced the file, finding a psychological evaluation buried in the archives. Candidate exhibits uncontrollable responses when encountering individuals who surpass his criteria. The words chilled her, a portrait of a man whose hate wasn't impulsive but a smoldering vow nurtured by rejection. She tweeted a screenshot, her caption blunt. Travis Coleman's hate didn't start at Arlington. It's been there all along. Veterans stand. The post hit 20,000 retweets, fueling the digital storm. Clara Mitchell sat in her small Missouri home that night, the broken portrait of Ethan on her kitchen table, its frame chipped but his smile intact. Her hands shook as she watched the news. Lillian's face on every channel, Coleman's gun a frozen image that burned her eyes. She hadn't spoken at the funeral, her grief too raw, but now anger stirred, a mother's fury for her son's desecrated memory. She opened a notebook, her pen trembling, and began to write, her words soft but sharp, each one a needle piercing the silence. My son died for America, she wrote, but America didn't keep its promise to him. Not even at his funeral. Ethan told me if I die, ask General Harper to say a few words for me. They didn't even let her near his body. The letter was brief, 2 pages, but its final line was a blade. If General Harper isn't safe, then none of us are. Clara mailed it to a local paper, not expecting much, but by morning it was everywhere, shared on X, read on MSNBC, quoted in a viral TikTok with 5 million views. The caption read, a mother's words cut deeper than any gun. Honor for Ethan. The letter struck a nerve, a spark igniting a nation already on edge. In Washington, D.C., a crowd gathered outside the Virginia State Police headquarters, their signs bold, Justice for Harper. No honor in hate. Veterans led the march, their medals glinting, their voices hoarse but unyielding. A former Navy SEAL, his face weathered, spoke to a local news crew, his words raw. I served with Harper in Mosul. She carried me out of a firefight. That cop's gun was an insult to every soldier. The crowd roared, their chants echoing through the streets, picked up by live streams that spread to millions. On X, Justice for Harper trended alongside Veterans Stand, a tweet from a black veteran gaining traction. General Harper's been fighting for us her whole life. Now we fight for her. The digital wave grew, comments flooding. This is about more than one cop. The system let him get this far. Stand with Harper. Sarah Nguyen's investigation deepened, her desk buried in printouts and coffee cups. Tips flooded her inbox, many from former colleagues of Coleman. A retired officer, speaking anonymously, sent a grainy video from 2016, showing Coleman restraining a 10-year-old black boy at a North Carolina school, the child's hands zip-tied, his cries ignored as Coleman sneered, "This one's wandering. Not allowed to move." The video, posted on X with Sarah's caption, "This is Travis Coleman, years before Arlington." Veterans Stand hit 3 million views in hours, the comments a storm, "He's a monster. How is he still employed? Justice now." Sarah dug further, uncovering 8 internal complaints against Coleman over a decade, racially charged remarks, coercive behavior, tampering with security cameras, all dismissed with counseled or insufficient evidence. Her next article, published online at midnight, was titled The System That Shielded Travis Coleman. It went viral, shared by senators, activists, and veterans, its opening line a gut punch. Travis Coleman didn't act alone. He was enabled by a system that looked away. The public's fury boiled over. In Chicago, a group of veterans organized a candlelight vigil outside a police station, their signs reading "Honor over Hate." A young woman, a former Army medic, spoke to the crowd, her voice trembling. "I saw General Harper save lives in Iraq. That cop's gun was a spit in the face of every soldier." The vigil live streamed on TikTok, gaining 2 million views, the comments a chorus of support. "We stand with Harper. Ethan's memory deserves better." In Los Angeles, students at UCLA held a sit-in, their banners bold, "No justice, no peace." A viral video showed a professor joining them, his voice breaking. "General Harper's silence is louder than any protest. She's forcing us to listen." The hashtags Veterans Stand and Honor for Ethan dominated social media. Joined by System Failed, a cry against the institutions that had let Coleman rise. Clara's letter kept spreading, its words quoted in sermons, talk shows, and X threads. A Virginia pastor read it aloud during Sunday service, his congregation weeping as he said, "If a mother's pain can't wake us, what will?" The video of his sermon hit 4 million views, the comments a plea, "Protect General Harper. Honor Ethan." A friend of Ethan's from his unit, a 24-year-old corporal, shared a page from Ethan's combat diary on X, the paper stained with sand and sweat. "If something happens to me, I hope General Harper delivers the eulogy." Her voice over gunfire kept me from panicking. The post gained 1 million retweets, its caption simple, "This is why she was at Arlington. Honor for Ethan." The diary page became a symbol, shared in memes, printed on posters, a reminder of the bond Coleman had tried to erase. Lillian Harper remained silent, her absence from the spotlight a choice, not a retreat. She returned to her modest D.C. apartment, her uniform hung carefully, her medals untouched. Her phone buzzed with messages reporters, activists, even senators, but she ignored them, her focus on a single photo on her desk. Her and Ethan in Kandahar, his grin wide, her hand on his shoulder. She didn't watch the news, didn't scroll X, but she knew the storm was growing. A knock came at her door, a young aide from the Pentagon, his face nervous. "Ma'am, the Joint Chiefs want a statement," he said. Lillian's voice was calm, unyielding. "The truth spoke at Arlington. I have nothing to add." The aide nodded, retreating, knowing her silence was louder than any press release, a refusal to let her honor be twisted into a spectacle. The investigation into Coleman accelerated, driven by public pressure and Sarah's reporting. The Virginia State Police, under fire, released a statement. "We are conducting a full review of Officer Coleman's actions." But it wasn't enough. A leaked email from a police captain, dated days before the funeral, surfaced on X. "Let Coleman handle the brass. He'll keep them in line." The email, shared by Sarah, hit 5 million views, the comments a fury. "This was planned. The system's rotten. Fire them all." A former colleague of Coleman, a female officer who'd left the force, contacted Sarah anonymously, her voice shaking. "He slapped me in an elevator for not standing at attention. I filed a complaint, but it vanished." Sarah's next article, "The Complaints That Disappeared," detailed a pattern of ignored allegations, its headline trending on X. Coleman's hate was no secret. Why was he protected? Protests grew, spilling into cities beyond D.C. In Atlanta, veterans and students marched together, their chants echoing, "No honor in hate." A viral video showed a black teenager, her voice fierce, addressing the crowd. "General Harper's my hero. She didn't need a gun to win." The clip hit 6 million views, the comments a wave of pride. "This generation gets it. Stand with Harper." In New York, a Times Square billboard flashed Clara's letter, its final line glowing. "If General Harper isn't safe, none of us are." Passers-by stopped, their phones raised, the image shared millions of times. On X, a senator tweeted, "General Harper's courage demands accountability. We're watching. Veterans stand." But not all agreed. A conservative radio host defended Coleman, his voice smug. He was following protocol. Harper escalated it. The backlash was swift, his show's hashtag drowned by system failed, users posting, "Protocol doesn't mean pointing a gun at a general." Sarah's reporting uncovered more, each revelation a blow to Coleman's legacy. A 2018 security camera footage, leaked by a whistleblower, showed Coleman berating a black cadet at a police academy, his words cruel. "You'll never wear a badge like me." The video, posted on X, hit 7 million views, the comments a storm. "This man's a cancer. How was he promoted? Justice for Harper." Sarah's articles became a beacon, her inbox flooded with stories from others who'd faced Coleman's hate. A black teacher he'd harassed at a traffic stop, a Latino officer he'd sabotaged. Her latest piece, "The Faces Travis Coleman Targeted," humanized the victims, its opening line haunting. Travis Coleman didn't just point a gun at General Harper. He aimed at anyone who challenged his world. The article trended globally, shared by celebrities, veterans, and activists, its impact undeniable. Clara's letter inspired action beyond words. In St. Mary's Church, Georgia, where her family had worshipped for generations, a prayer service drew 200 people, their candles flickering as they knelt for Ethan's memory. The pastor, Father Reuben Ellis, 64, read Clara's letter, his voice breaking. "A mother's truth is God's truth." The service live-streamed on YouTube, gaining 3 million views, the comments a prayer. "Bless General Harper. Rest in peace, Ethan." Clara attended, her face weary but strong, her nephew by her side, his small voice singing a hymn that brought tears to every eye. Outside, a banner hung, handwritten in brown cursive. "We pray for the values that once were our backbone." The image went viral, shared with honor for Ethan, a symbol of a community refusing to forget. The military community responded with quiet fury. A coalition of 60 veteran organizations issued an open letter to Congress, their words stark. "If General Harper cannot be respected at Arlington, our system has forfeited its right to exist." The letter, shared on X, hit 2 million retweets, the comments a call to action, "Reform now. Protect our heroes." Military forums buzzed, users posting stories of Harper's valor rescuing 18 soldiers in Kandahar, surviving an ambush in Iraq, declining promotions to stay on the ground. A retired general tweeted, "I served with Harper. She's the best of us." Coleman's gun was an attack on every soldier. Veterans stand. The Pentagon, under pressure, issued a rare statement. "We stand with General Harper and are reviewing security protocols at national ceremonies." But the words felt hollow, the public demanding more than promises. Protests intensified, their energy raw and unyielding. In D.C., a second march swelled to 5,000, veterans and civilians united, their signs bold. System failed Harper. Honor Ethan. A young black veteran, his prosthetic leg visible, spoke to a news crew, his voice steady. "Harper saved my squad in Syria. That cop's gun was a betrayal of my service." The clip hit 8 million views, the comments a wave. "This is why we march. Stand with Harper." In San Francisco, a flash mob of students performed a silent reenactment of the Arlington standoff, one woman standing as Harper, others as veterans, their stillness a protest louder than shouts. The video, shared on TikTok, gained 5 million likes, the caption simple, "Silence is power." Veterans stand. Sarah's investigation reached a turning point. A whistleblower, a former police dispatcher, sent her a 2019 audio recording of Coleman briefing his team before a high-profile event. His voice was clear, chilling. "If any colored person tries to cross the line, teach them where they belong." The audio, posted on X, hit 10 million views, the comments a fury. "This is who he is. No more excuses. Jail him." Sarah's article, "The Voice of Travis Coleman's Hate," broke the internet, its headline trending. He planned to target. Arlington was no accident. The Virginia State Police Commissioner, James O'Connor, faced a press conference, his face ashen. "We condemn Officer Coleman's actions," he said. But the crowd booed, their signs waving. "Resign. System failed." The audio became a rallying cry, shared in protests, quoted in editorials, a damning proof of Coleman's intent. Clara's letter kept resonating, its words a touchstone for a nation grappling with its conscience. A high school in Missouri, Ethan's alma mater, held a memorial assembly, students reading her letter aloud, their voices breaking. A 16-year-old girl, her eyes wet, spoke to the crowd. "Ethan was my cousin. General Harper was his hero. Why did she have to face a gun?" The video, shared on TikTok, hit 4 million views, the comments a plea, "Protect Harper. Honor Ethan." In D.C., a street artist painted a mural of Lillian standing before the casket, Clara beside her, Ethan's face in the sky. The image, shared on X, gained 3 million retweets, the caption bold, "This is America's truth. Honor for Ethan." The mural became a pilgrimage site, flowers piling at its base, notes taped to the wall. "Thank you, General Harper. Rest in peace, Ethan." Lillian remained in her apartment, her silence a shield against the chaos. She received a letter from Clara, hand-delivered by a courier, its words simple, "You gave my son peace. I'll fight for yours." Lillian read it, her fingers tracing the ink, her eyes on Ethan's photo. She didn't respond, not out of coldness, but because her fight was already won on the stone path at Arlington in the silence that had broken Coleman. Her phone buzzed with a Pentagon request for a meeting, but she declined, her aide relaying her words. "The system must answer, not me." Her refusal fueled the narrative, X posts praising her. "General Harper doesn't need to speak. Her actions did. She's the leader we need." Veterans stand. The investigation closed with a bombshell. On March 5th, the Virginia State Police announced Coleman's suspension and impending charges, use of a weapon in a federal ceremonial zone, racially motivated threat, abuse of authority. The press release, posted on X, hit 5 million views, the comments a mix of relief and rage. "About time. Not enough. Jail him for life." Sarah's final article, "The Fall of Travis Coleman," detailed the evidence, leaked files, audio, complaints, its conclusion stark. Coleman's gun was the symptom. The system was the disease. The piece trended globally, shared by veterans, activists, and ordinary citizens, its impact a clarion call for reform. Protests continued, their signs now demanding, "Fix the system. Honor Harper." The nation watched, its conscience stirred, knowing this wasn't just about one cop, one general, but a mirror held to its soul. Clara sat in her kitchen, the mural's image on her phone, her eyes wet but fierce. She whispered to Ethan's portrait, "We're fighting, son." The boy, her nephew, drew a picture of Lillian by the casket, his crayons bold, his note simple. She's our hero. The drawing shared on X hit 2 million retweets, the caption a vow. For Ethan, for Harper, we won't stop. Honor for Ethan. The storm was far from over, but its direction was clear, a nation awakening. A system trembling. A general's silence louder than any gun. The federal courtroom in Washington, D.C., was a crypt of silence on the morning of March 10, 2025, its oak-paneled walls absorbing every breath, every rustle, as if the air itself knew the weight of what was about to unfold. Outside, a crowd of thousands pressed against barricades, their signs swaying justice for Harper. Honor for Ethan, their chants a low roar that seeped through the windows, a pulse of a nation demanding to be heard. Inside, the benches were packed, veterans in dress uniforms, reporters with laptops, and ordinary citizens clutching Clara Mitchell's letter, its words now a manifesto etched into the public's heart. The live stream of Travis Coleman's gun pointed at General Lillian Harper at Arlington National Cemetery had reached 10 million views, the hashtags Veteran Stand and Honor for Ethan a digital tide that refused to ebb. Coleman, 42, sat at the defendant's table, his suit pressed but his face haggard, his gray eyes scanning the room, defiant yet hollow, a man who'd once wielded a badge now stripped to his core. Lillian Harper, 52, entered last, her four-star general's uniform gleaming, her stars a beacon in the dim light, her face a mask of resolve forged in battles far bloodier than this. She carried no notes, no entourage, only the weight of a truth that needed no embellishment. The judge, a woman with steel-gray hair and a gaze that could cut glass, called the court to order, her gavel a sharp crack that silenced the room. The prosecutor, a lean man in his 40s, rose, his voice steady but charged. This case is not about one man's actions, he said, but a system that allowed a gun to be drawn in the heart of a military funeral, on a general who embodies our nation's honor. The crowd stirred, a murmur of agreement, but Lillian's eyes remained fixed forward, her hands clasped, her silence a presence that filled the room. Coleman's attorney, a sharp-eyed man known for defending high-profile cases, leaned back, his smile thin, a predator sizing up prey. The charges were use of a weapon in a federally protected ceremonial zone, racially motivated threat, abuse of authority, obstruction of military rights, desecration of a national service member's dignity, each one a blade. The final charge carrying a maximum of life without parole. Coleman's jaw tightened, but his gaze didn't waver, as if he believed he could still bend the truth to his will. The prosecutor called Lillian to the stand, and the room held its breath as she rose, her polished shoes clicking on the marble floor. Each step a testament to the battles she'd walked through: Kandahar, Mosul, Iraq. She swore in, her voice calm, her hand steady, and when asked to sit, she spoke softly, her words cutting through the silence. I will stand. The crowd exhaled, a collective awe, knowing she stood not for herself but for Ethan Mitchell, for every soldier she'd led, for a principle no gun could shatter. The prosecutor began, his voice measured. General Harper, describe what happened at Arlington. Lillian's gaze swept the room, not lingering on Coleman, her words deliberate, each one a stone in a foundation of truth. I came to honor Sergeant Ethan Mitchell, a soldier I commanded, a soldier who trusted me. I presented my military ID as protocol demands. Officer Coleman didn't question its authenticity. He questioned my right to carry it, because of the color of my skin. The room stilled, her words a mirror held to every face, forcing a reckoning. She continued, her voice unyielding. He drew a gun, pointed it at my chest, in front of Ethan's casket, his family, his comrades. I faced the Taliban, survived landmines, lost part of my arm to war. But I had never faced a gun on American soil, in a place meant for honor, until that day. The crowd's silence was heavy, not sentiment, but a shared shame that no one could deny. A juror, a white woman in her 50s, drew a long breath, her eyes wet, realizing she wasn't judging right from wrong but whether America still had the honor to call this justice. Coleman's attorney stood, his tone sharp but cautious, sensing the room's weight. General, you wear your uniform today. Is that to sway the court with emotion? Lillian's eyes met his, neither angry nor tolerant, her voice steady. I wear it because the soldier I came to honor can no longer wear his. The attorney pressed, his voice probing. Are you here as a witness or a political symbol? The question was a trap, designed to paint her as a pawn, but Lillian tilted her head, unshaken, her response a blade. I'm here because someone thought a gun could erase my service. They were wrong. The crowd murmured, a ripple of pride, and the attorney sat, scribbling notes, knowing no words could dull the truth in her voice. The prosecutor presented evidence the live stream, now a global artifact, showing Coleman's gun, his sneer, his words. Fakes look real good now. The video played on a courtroom screen, the crowd wincing as the portrait of Ethan fell, its glass shattering, Clara's gasp audible in the footage. Clara sat in the gallery, her hands clutching Ethan's broken frame, her eyes wet but fierce, her nephew beside her, his small face pale but resolute. Then the unthinkable happened, a moment that would sear the trial into history. As the prosecutor introduced a leaked 2019 audio of Coleman saying, "If any colored person tries to cross the line, teach them where they belong," the courtroom screen flickered. Static crackled, and a new video appeared, unprompted, its grainy footage showing Coleman at a 2020 school event, berating a black teenager, his voice cruel. "You think you're somebody? Stay in your place." The crowd gasped, the judge banging her gavel, the prosecutor stunned, shouting, "Who authorized this?" The attorney leaped up, his face red, yelling, "This is tampering." But the damage was done. The video, hacked into the system, played on, Coleman's hate laid bare, the teenager's tears a mirror to Clara's pain. The live stream, broadcasting the trial to millions, surged to 15 million views, X erupting, "He's a monster. This is who he is. Justice now." Outside, the crowd roared, their chants shaking the courthouse. No honor in hate. A young reporter, Saren Gwynn, watched from the press bench, her laptop open, her ex-post instant. Hacked video just showed Coleman's true face. The system can't hide him anymore. Veterans stand. The post hit 50,000 retweets in minutes. The hashtag system failed trending alongside honor for Ethan. The judge ordered a recess, technicians scrambling to secure the system, but the video was already everywhere, shared on TikTok, Reddit, CNN. A viral clip showed a protester outside, her voice fierce. That video wasn't a hack. It was the truth breaking free. The comment section exploded. General Harper deserves justice. Ethan's watching. Jail Coleman for life. The trial resumed, the air thicker, every eye on Coleman, his defiance crumbling, his face pale, his hands trembling in cuffs. The prosecutor called Clara Mitchell. Her steps slow but steady. Her mourning cloth replaced by a simple black dress. Ethan's portrait in her hands. She swore in, her voice soft but unyielding. Each word a mother's truth. "Ethan loved General Harper," she said, her eyes on the jury. "He said her voice kept him alive in battle. He wanted her to speak at his funeral. That man," she pointed at Coleman, her hand steady, "stole that from my son." The crowd wept, a juror wiping his eyes. Clara's words a wound that needed no elaboration. She held up the portrait, its broken frame a symbol, her voice breaking. "This is all I have left. Don't let his hate take that too." The boy, her nephew, sat in the gallery, his small hands clenched, his eyes on Clara. A silent vow to carry her strength. Coleman's attorney cross-examined, his tone gentle but probing. "Mrs. Mitchell, your grief is real. But was General Harper's presence a provocation?" Clara's eyes flashed, her voice steel. Provocation? She was Ethan's commander, his hero. The only provocation was that man's gun. The crowd murmured, a ripple of pride, and the attorney sat, knowing he'd lost the room. The prosecutor presented more evidence, leaked emails, complaints, the 2012 psychological evaluation calling Coleman uncontrollable, around those who surpassed him. Each piece was a brick in a wall closing around him, his attorney's objections drowned by the truth. The live stream hit 20 million views, ex-posts raging. "The evidence is overwhelming. Coleman's done. Harper's silence is our voice." The confrontation came, the moment the nation had waited for. Coleman stood, his suit crisp but his eyes wild, his voice steady but laced with venom. "You want the truth?" he said, his gaze sweeping the jury, the crowd landing on Lillian. "I'm not your villain. I'm what this system made me. I did what you all think but never say." The crowd gasped, the judge banging her gavel, but Coleman pressed on, his words a curse. "I kept order when you looked away. You cheer her now, but you let me rise. Don't pretend you're clean." A juror, a black man in his 60s, bowed his head, his hands shaking, struck by a truth twisted into poison. Sarah tweeted from the press bench. "Coleman's not confessing. He's accusing us all. System failed." The post hit 100,000 retweets, the comments a storm. "He's right about the system, but he's no victim. Harper's the hero here." Lillian rose, her presence a counterpoint, her voice calm but piercing. You didn't draw that gun because of protocol, she said, her eyes locked on Coleman's, her words a verdict. You drew it because you couldn't stand that someone like me wears these stars. She unbuttoned her jacket, revealing a purple heart, its red ribbon stark against her uniform. I bled for this country, lost part of my arm, saved lives you'll never know. That gun wasn't just aimed at me. It was aimed at every soldier who trusted me. The crowd wept, Clara clutching the portrait, the boy's eyes wide, the jurors frozen. Coleman's face faltered, his defiance cracking, his voice a hiss. You're a symbol, nothing more. Lillian's response was soft, final. If I'm a symbol, it's of a truth you can't erase. The judge halted the exchange, her gavel sharp, but the room was changed, the air heavy with a truth no one could unhear. The prosecution rested, the defense floundering, their witnesses former colleagues faltering under cross-examination, their praise of Coleman's duty hollow against the evidence. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, the crowd outside growing, their chants unrelenting. Justice for Harper. Honor for Ethan. Sarah's live tweeting kept the nation glued, her posts a pulse. The jury's out. The system's on trial. Veterans stand. At 6 p.m. the jury returned, their faces grim, the foreman rising, his voice steady but heavy. We, the people's jury, find the defendant, Travis Coleman, guilty on all counts, sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. The crowd erupted, a roar of relief and rage, tears streaming, veterans saluting, Clara sobbing into the portrait, the boy hugging her, his voice clear. Ethan's happy now. Coleman stood, his face blank, his eyes empty, a man hollowed by his own hate. He laughed, a cracked, bitter sound, his voice low. You think this fixes anything? The system's still rotten. The judge's gavel silenced him, the bailiffs escorting him out, his steps heavy, his legacy dust. Lillian remained seated, her gaze forward, her silence a victory, her stars a testament. Sarah tweeted, guilty. But the real verdict is what we do next. System failed. The post hit 200,000 retweets, the comments a vow. Reform now. Honor Harper. Outside, the crowd chanted, their signs waving, the live stream at 25 million views, Exolite with posts, Justice for Harper. Ethan's memory lives. Clara stepped into the dusk, the portrait in her hands, her nephew beside her, their faces weary but strong. A protester handed her a candle, its flame flickering, a symbol of a fight far from over. Lillian left quietly, her uniform a beacon, her silence a call to a nation to look in the mirror. The trial was over, but the reckoning had just begun. The dusk of March 10, 2025 settled over Washington, D.C. as the chance of justice for Harper. Honor for Ethan. Faded into the evening air outside the federal courthouse. Travis Coleman, 42, was gone, his life sentence without parole a cold verdict that echoed through the packed streets, where thousands held candles, their flames flickering against signs that demanded reform. Lillian Harper, 52, slipped away from the courtroom, her four-star general's uniform a quiet beacon in the twilight, her silence louder than the roars of victory. She didn't pause for reporters, didn't glance at the cameras, her polished shoes carrying her to her modest apartment, where a single photo of Ethan Mitchell, 22, smiled from her desk. Clara Mitchell, 58, Ethan's mother, stood among the crowd, clutching her son's broken portrait, its chip frame a relic of the funeral that had changed a nation. Her nephew, the boy in the miniature uniform, held her hand, his small voice clear. Did we win, Aunt Clara? She knelt, her eyes wet but fierce, whispering, we're not done yet. The live stream of the trial, now at 30 million views, pulsed with comments on X, TikTok, and Reddit. General Harper's silence won. Coleman's gone, but the system's still here. Honor for Ethan forever. The nation didn't sleep that night. The hashtags veteran stand and system fail burned through social media, joined by Harper Lives, a tribute to Lillian's unyielding resolve. In a small Missouri town, Clara Mitchell returned home, her kitchen table a shrine to Ethan, his purple heart, his diary, her letter now shared millions of times. She lit a candle, its flame casting shadows on the portrait's shards, and made a decision that would ripple far beyond her grief. She called St. Mary's Church, where her family had prayed for 3 generations, and spoke to Father Reuben Ellis, 64, her voice steady. I want a prayer service, she said, not to mourn, but to reclaim Ethan's honor. Father Ellis agreed, his own heart heavy, and by March 12th, the church's pews were packed. 300 mourners, veterans, neighbors, strangers gathering under a handwritten banner. We pray for the values that once were our backbone. Clara stood at the altar, Ethan's portrait beside her, and spoke, her words raw. My son died believing in honor. General Harper fought for that. I won't let hate steal it. The crowd wept, their candles glowing, but Clara's act was bolder. She held up a photo of Travis Coleman, torn from a news article, and lit a match, her hands trembling but sure. The flame caught, the paper curling, and as it burned she said, "This is for Ethan, for Harper, for every soul this man tried to break." The church stilled, the act divisive, some gasped. Others nodded, but the image was undeniable. A mother's defiance against a system that had failed her son. A young parishioner live-streamed it on TikTok, the video hitting 5 million views in hours, the caption stark. Clara Mitchell burned hate to honor her son. Honor for Ethan. Comments flooded. She's a warrior. This is justice. Stand with Clara. But not all agreed. A local news outlet called it extreme, sparking debate on X, where a veteran tweeted, Clara didn't burn a man. She burned what he stood for. Veterans stand. The post gained 100,000 retweets. The church's steps soon piled with flowers, notes, and candles, a shrine to a mother's courage. In Arlington National Cemetery, a new monument rose, unplanned, unscripted. A single piece of paper, taped to the eastern wall, bore 4 words in trembling ink, I turned my back. No name, no date, but its message was a confession, a spark that ignited a movement. By March 15th, hundreds of notes appeared, each a handwritten apology, a reckoning with silence that had let Coleman's hate fester. A veteran wrote, I clapped when he was promoted. I'm sorry. A police officer, masked to hide his face, taped his at midnight. We stayed silent because we feared seeing ourselves. The notes grew 1,326 by week's end, pressed onto a hollow steel frame built by architecture students, its recycled panels salvaged from old detention center gates. The Wall of Apologies, as Whispers named it, wasn't a tourist site. No tours, no plaques, just a place to bow not for the dead, but for the conscience society had let die. A boy, 9, in a red shirt, penciled his note. Why do adults need to relearn how to treat heroes? Shared on X, it hit 2 million retweets, the caption simple, a child's truth. Harper lives. Lillian Harper stayed away from the spotlight. Her apartment a sanctuary, her phone off, her silence a choice. She saw the wall's photo on X, the notes a mosaic of guilt and hope, but didn't visit, knowing her presence wasn't needed. Her stand at Arlington had already spoken. A letter arrived and signed from a Pentagon cadet. Your silence taught me more than any lecture. Thank you. She kept it beside Ethan's photo, her only acknowledgement of the storm she'd sparked. The Pentagon, under pressure, convened a closed meeting, and on March 20th, a proposal surfaced to engrave a line from Lillian's trial testimony on the main gate. If I die here, the country will know why. Debate raged, some calling it too bold, but no one could deny its truth. By March 25th, a compromise was carved, smaller but no less piercing. Neither bow down nor press others down. Below, in faint letters, Lillian's words. If one day you find yourselves at gunpoint, remember I did not step back. No ceremony marked it, no cameras, just soldiers pausing daily, reading, moving on, their silence a vow to carry her truth. Travis Coleman's name vanished, not by decree but by a collective severance. At the Virginia State Police headquarters, a plaque listing honored officers was altered, his name replaced by a blank space, a maintenance worker's ex-post viral. A clean void is better than a filthy honor. The post hit 3 million retweets, the image a symbol of erasure. At a police academy, a bust of Coleman was removed overnight, replaced by a tin plaque. No longer represents us. A cadet's video captioned Honor returned to silence gained 10 million views, the comments a chorus. He's gone. Harper lives. Textbooks dropped his name, his speeches erased from training videos, his pension revoked with a single line. Violation of public trust. In the federal prison, inmates turned their backs when he passed, a silent shunning, one carving on his table. A leader is followed, not feared. The guards left it, the mark a scar he couldn't escape. Saringwin, the reporter who'd broken Coleman's past, wrote a final piece, The Legacy of Lillian Harper, published March 30th. It didn't glorify Lillian but questioned, why did it take a gun to see her? The article trended globally, shared by veterans, students, and activists, its opening line haunting. General Harper didn't ask to be a symbol. but her silence forced us to become one. X posts echoed it. She's not a hero. She's a mirror. Harper Lives. Schools changed, the National Strategic Officer Academy adding a lecture titled not because she was a general, but because she didn't draw her weapon. A cadet's tweet went viral. Harper taught me ethics isn't about fighting. It's about standing. Veterans stand. At a Missouri high school, Ethan's classmates launched a scholarship in his name, funded by donations from ex-users, the announcement gaining 1 million likes. For Ethan, for honor. Honor for Ethan. Clara's prayer service inspired more. In Chicago, veterans held a vigil, their candles forming Harper's initials. The video shared with 4 million views. The caption, "Her silence lights our way." In D.C., a mural of Lillian and Clara grew, flowers piling at its base, notes taped, "Thank you, General." "Rest in peace, Ethan." Clara visited, her nephew drawing a new picture Lillian by the casket, Ethan smiling above. Shared on TikTok, it hit 3 million likes, the caption a vow, "We won't forget." Honor for Ethan. Clara spoke to a local reporter, her voice soft but firm. "I burned his picture not from hate, but to free Ethan's memory." The quote trended, ex-users posting, "Clara's strength is our strength." Veterans stand. Lillian's legacy wasn't in statues or streets, but in questions. A law student's thesis, The Structure of an Unrefusable Refusal, analyzed her silence, shared on X with 500,000 retweets. Harper didn't speak. She forced us to. At a Department of Justice conference, a Coleman quote was interrupted by applause, not approval, but a demand to move on, a speaker saying, "The system needs new voices." System failed. The wall of apologies grew, notes now in blood-red ink. One reading, "I believed in him. Never again." The cemetery's janitors paused daily reading, their silence a tribute. Lillian saw it from afar, holding a blank note. Her message lived, not written. Coleman's erasure was complete. In prison, his name became Inmate 739, guards ignoring his protests. A book he requested returned with a note. "Your theory didn't save you." His cell's walls bore scratches coward with a gun unscrubbed, a mark of contempt. A subway billboard, once honoring him, was painted over, red text bleeding. "Not everyone displayed deserves to be again." Ex-users shared it, 2 million retweets. "He's not history. He's a mistake." Clara's final act was a letter to Lillian, hand-delivered. "You gave Ethan peace. We'll give you justice." Lillian kept it, her silence a reply, her stars a legacy no gun could dim. The nation stood at a crossroads, the wall of apologies a mirror, Lillian's words at the Pentagon a guide. A child's ex-post summed it, "General Harper didn't fight. She stood. So can we." Harper Lives. The storm had passed, but its echoes remained, a call to answer. What do we stand for?